Hello, any early birds? I opened the classroom 5 minutes early today. So if you're listening to this on the replay, you can move ahead if possible as we wait for people to get into the classroom and touch base. Yay, there's Beth Ann. Nice to see you. Beth Ann saying that the course has been extremely helpful and that she's grateful. I'm really glad because you've worked hard at this. It hasn't been my patting on you on the head, but my challenging you to go a little bit deeper into your story and making sure that you know what to do next time around. And I really appreciate, Beth Ann, that you have been really, really good about giving feedback to other people. So you are learning from them as well as learning from me. And this is something that is invaluable. Beth Ann signed up for the challenges. And the challenges, for those who may not know what they are, they're basically like 3 days that are free before any workshop that I give to let people have get a feeling for what the workshop might be about, to make sure that I work well for them. I know it's hard to believe that somebody doesn't get my warped sense of humor, but this is just a way to kind of like take the test drive. So I'm really glad when people do that and take advantage of it. Sometimes all you need as a writer is those 3 days. We usually have at least 2 assignments or exercises to do. So, and it gets you refocused on your writing. So Beth Ann says it got her out of a rut. And she's also referencing the fact that she's really enjoying participating with the other writers in the class, because this is where you find others who are committing to their craft, committing to their understanding of what's involved to write. When you commit your time and when you commit your money, that puts you up here, head and shoulder above other people who, for whatever reason, and I get it, I understand budgets, I understand that taking the time, especially when you're working a full-time job or have family, et cetera, that it's not always doable. But it's a way of basically telling the universe, I've asked for this, I'm committing to it, and here's a chance that I'm going to take. So we have Louise here. Lovely to see you, Louise, and Hope on board, and Jan is here. Louise is pointing out that she really enjoyed the class interaction in the post, because this is something that we can forget to do, is to learn from all sorts of people. Jackie's here also. Okay, this is our last Q&A here for this particular course. And it's the opportunity to ask those questions that are still frustrating you or not quite clear enough. Louise was at the Hooks class yesterday, which if you're on my newsletter, that's where I try to let people know when I am on top of things, which is not always, but that I'm doing something with a different group. Some of them are free, some of them ask for a small commitment, a fee type of thing. So that's another way to keep on top of it. Oh, everybody was at the Hooks. Where Mary over-talked. So that was really, I'm really glad that you guys were able to take advantage of that, because hooks can really make a difference in how you lead a reader through your story. Just like we're looking at 12 templates, and some of those templates might cover only a couple pages, but some of them cover a big chunk of word count. So going ahead and doing, finding the breadcrumbs and how to put the breadcrumbs, which is what hooks are, to get you all the way through, can be very, very helpful. So Jan was there too. Maybe we should just say anybody was not there. I was only able to see about 2 to 3 people at a time, and it was the same people. So I didn't catch that so many people were there. And that's really nice. Now there's going to be another class coming up with the Orange County romance writers. And it's about an hour class, and it's about active setting. So it's talking about how you use setting in your course. And I think they do it for a nominal fee for folks who are not part of that particular work writers group. But again, the more we as writers commit to our writing and keep sharpening our blades or saws or whatever the phrase is, so that we're not just learning a concept and then we don't have any situations to hone the skills. So Louise liked that the analysis of the examples for hooks. And what I feel oftentimes is these were just people who sent through. And most of them let me know what type of story they were writing. So that way people got you use hooks in all genres. It's not limited to a particular genre. So, and depending on the type of story that you're writing, the higher the tension in the story. So like Jan writing romantic suspense, that suspense element means that it's more tense than, let's say, an inspirational or sweet romance. So knowing that gives you an idea of the number of hooks that will, the more tension, the more hooks you want to use in the key places in your story. Beth Ann has a question. Would you please discuss the difference between the external story goal and the next external story goal? Template 7, question 7. Okay. There is in the novel a external story goal to the end of the novel. If you're writing a romance, oftentimes that question, that external story goal is get these two people together. If you're writing something with a strong external storyline, like Beth Ann, you're doing that with your characters. World War II in Russia will they survive the war? So that's going from the beginning of the story basically to the end of the story. That is called the external story goal. Their goal is to survive the war. A goal might be to buy the family farm. A goal might be to, in the movies that we watched for this particular story, Princess Bride, is his external story goal was to stop Buttercup from marrying Prince Humperdinck. In the story Must Love Dogs, her external goal was to get out of her rut after her divorce and try dating again. She wasn't looking for Mr. Right. She was just simply moving in her life. Aeon Flux, that one's easy, because her goal was to stop the family who for several hundred years had been programming the people, the remainder of the people after the big pandemic that happened. And her goal was to stop that. So that's overall external story goal. But you have the next external story goal, and that gets you from template 1 to template 5, quarter of the way into the story. Once you've reached the goal, which is to act on that initial inciting incident question, will they or won't they do something? That question is answered. So then you focus on the next external story goal, and the next one is template 8, the midpoint of the story. So once they get to template 8 and they've taken a specific action that answers the question, will they take that action or not? Then they go from template 8 to the black moment. Now, the character doesn't necessarily know that they're going to deal with that black moment, but you as the author knows. So what we mean by that is, with the templates, we're referring the big template. So next template is template 10. So anytime you see on the templates the next external story goal or the immediate external story goal, we are referencing template 5, template 8, and template 10. And it is just to make it clear that you have to reach these points in order to get to the big story, external story goal, which is what you set up at the beginning of the story. Does that help a little bit? We want to make it clear that it's not an internal goal at all. It is something that they've determined that if you're going to attack the castle in the middle of the story and you think that's all you have to do, and you get to that castle and you attack it, but the story doesn't end there. The people in the castle escape and go to a more fortified place. So then that becomes the next external story goal. Okay, that's a great question, Beth Ann, that you raised. I'm glad you did it. Something else that I wanted to bring up, because this is something that I see fairly often as we're filling out the template answers or the exercise answers. When we are going up to template 5, template 8, template 10, there's that question of what action do they take? What specific action to reach, or after they've gone through the choices, should I go, should I not, after they've had a mentor help them, they take an action. And if you find in your answers that you're using terminology like they think, they're deciding, they're considering, those are all internal thinking process. It's not an action. And so be careful with your word nuances, because that can keep your character kind of treading in water and not actually doing something that the reader can see is a clear action. As long as they are in their head, there's no risk. So it's kind of like the goal, next immediate goal, is to apply for the job. And it's like you don't want to apply for the job, but there's reasons to do it, and you get right up there. And if you've written that they're still thinking or deciding or considering or any of those kind of key words that mean they're in their head, it means they haven't taken an action yet, and the reader can't see that they've committed. And trust me, we will all do that at some point. We'll get them up to a certain point, and then they're still going to be thinking instead of acting. So, and it often happens with the character that we haven't really fleshed out. So many times when we're writing, we identify with or understand one character more than another. And so when we get to do the others templates, it's very easy to fall into, I don't know what they're doing, so I guess they're still thinking type of situation. But that's something to be aware of. Have anybody been able to get to the scene and sequel or have any questions about that process? Okay, Helen says, I had kind of forgotten that the character had to have a choice, a decision, and an action at all of the major templates. And that's easy to understand. So it is just something, the more we can learn from what we've done and then caught ourselves and said, oh, this is why I'm getting jammed up here, or have seen somebody else kind of stumble, in these templates right before those major 5, 8, and 10 templates, then we get to learn from that. Because isn't that the definition of an expert, is somebody who's made every mistake once? Okay. Jan, what is the best way to plot scene and sequel? Or is it plot as you go? Here again, we're using the same words to mean a lot of different things. Plot. You have the big structure. You have the big map of, let's say, the United States, and you're traveling from New York to Seattle. That's the big map, and you're going to go to Chicago. That's kind of in the middle. Scene and sequel is what gets you through from New York to Chicago. It gets you, it is the, when you're in the driver's seat or you're in the passenger seat and someone's saying, how do I get through Ohio and get to Chicago? And that person is saying, okay, this is what we have to do. We have to go to this town next, and that town next, and that town next. That's what scene and sequel does. So it is, you may have 5 scenes in a chapter and 3 or 4 sequels. You may have, because if you have 2 different points of view, you might even have more. So the longer your scenes are, the more forward momentum towards the external goal in the story is, the more specific the character is looking to do something that's going to get them to somewhere that then will get them to where they want to go. So more scenes, faster the pacing of your story is going to be, and the more sense of action happening. More sequels and longer sequels are very, very good for things like certain types of women's fiction, or certain types of like psychological thrillers, where you want to go through the thought process and the reaction and the emotional elements and expand on them. So the story slows down, but it's not meant to be a bullet train. It's meant to be a delving in deeper and deeper into the ramifications, emotional ramifications of what just went on. So you are going to, usually a novel, particularly if it is a genre novel, romance, mystery, thrillers, historical fiction, anything except literary fiction. They start in a sequel. And the reason they start in a sequel is that inciting incident just happens to them. But from that point forward, Jan, your character, the point of view character, is driving their story. So once the sequel and they are considering, then they go to a scene. And that's, I think there's a little graphic there showing the little blocks, one color for one person and one color for another person. Those are points of view. And it can be someone it's mostly their story, then their little blocks are going to be bigger than any other point of view blocks that are in your story. So does that track for you? And Helen says, I watch the scene in sequel videos. It seems so simple, but it's so hard to do. Oh, absolutely. There's nothing that's easy about writing a book. And when we see it on TV and it's like, I'm going to write the book. And they sit down and they take out a fountain pen and they get a fainting couch, because that's the image that we have of what it takes to write. But it is so hard. That's not an excuse to stop, though. But what that does is it separates those who really have stories that they want to get out there from those that, I could go bake something, or I can go play mahjong online, or I can do something different because this is hard. This is what happens in a novel also, that when they first take that first action in template 5 to go towards something, they think this is all I have to do. All I have to do is sign up for a writing course, or all I have to do is join a writing group, and that's it. And you see those, sadly enough, amongst the longer you've been a writer, the more you will see those who might be really amazing writers or have great stories, but they just go up and stop. They're not going to challenge themselves. They're not going to take the risk of having someone read their work or having someone point out areas that, with a little tweak here and there, can make the story and pull it all together. Because that is scary. But that is seen in sequel is one of the ways that you can ease into it a little bit is to take a story that you've already read. So you know, or go ahead and read a story, and then come back and say, okay, how do I know this is a scene? What you do is you look for that goal. All right, that's a pretty good clue that someone is very clear, the character is very clear, this is what they're trying to do. So that's the beginning of a scene. Now, scenes do not have to always end at the disaster. So, from point of view, you've got me, I'm in my scene, and I'm not going to have the goal, the conflict, and then the disaster every time. Sometimes, as a writer, you want to stop it on that conflict and then switch to the point of view of another character. But if you can analyze it in somebody else's work, it can make it easier to see how to start applying it in your own. So, Helen, if something seems too simple, there's a reason everyone doesn't do it. And that's because, just like you found in answering the questions seem, well, it's an easy question. It's just one question. I should be able to get this. Or the belief system, I should be able to understand this right away. But it's deceptive. And it's when you challenge yourself, when you take that risk and say, okay, here's my belief system, and it has 7 things I'm afraid of, and that should be good enough. And then somebody like me will come along and say, there's too many things. How's the reader going to understand really what they're afraid of? And that's where you start digging deeper. And that's the way Seen and Sequel work. So you got through this course, you can get through Seen and Sequel. And those 2 books might help with you with understanding them. So there's also, in the Teachable Classroom that you're in now, I do an hour talking about Seen and Sequel to help you. So that might be helpful too. Then I have Jackie. How short can the sequel be? If you're writing something like a thriller, the sequel can be 1 sentence, as long as it has the 3 elements to it. If you're writing something like women's fiction that's about loss and abandonment, that sequel can be the whole chapter. So there's no hard and fast rule. You use it the way that it works for your story. Beth Ann says, there are several questions later templates that ask who else is impacted in the story beside the couple. What if the couple is pretty much alone at those points, such as the black moment in the story? Then the whole reason for those questions is oftentimes we can forget that in genre fiction, in mysteries, in romances, in a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, the whole basic assumption coming out of the old myths and fairy tales that were passed down from generations was that here are the lessons learned. And it's not just about this couple, it's about the larger group. That's why oftentimes romances used to end on weddings, because it's a sign that this couple took enough risk to pledge before the community that they are going to love and honor and support one another. And it gives that warm and fuzzy feelings. But if you don't have any other characters in the situation at that time, you basically, it may not impact other people, but it will impact, I'm just going to make stuff up here, Beth Ann, that might help you. So when you get to the point at the black moment, you're reassuring the reader that it's not just about these 2 characters surviving the war, because of the other people they meet along the way. So they may be able to help somebody who is also basically the whole continent of Eurasia was a big, vast group of refugees. So they may not right at this point help that, but they can possibly help someone that they meet along the way. So you show that it's not just about, that's in a romance particularly, a lot of times people, well, they got the perfect person and they got together. And it's like, no, it's not about that. It's about that, the larger community. It's a way to give lessons and give So Beth Ann says, so it could impact someone in the future or the present. Absolutely. It is, it doesn't even have to be a person. It can be, they save an animal along the way that has been abandoned. It means that because they have gone through this learning curve about what it means to survive, they reach out and help someone or something else to survive, whether it's a bird or an animal or a person. If they hadn't gone through what they did go through, they wouldn't have the empathy or the wherewithal or the realization that survival is about more than one person or the other person. Okay. So, got some more. Helen says, there's a real aha for me to understand that you don't have to go through a complete scene sequence before moving to another point of view. Exactly, because what happens at the end of each of those elements in a scene or a sequel? So, scene, the goal. Well, there's questions raised. Are they going to reach the goal or are they not going to reach the goal? When they get to the conflict, that raises questions. When they get to the disaster, that raises questions. When they get to the reaction, that raises questions. So you can stop anywhere you want on that. So it's a tool that doesn't have to be, this needs 12 pages, that needs 12 pages. So read something like James Patterson, who's a thriller writer, and even when he's writing in young adult, the pacing is phenomenal, but it's because he can have a scene that lasts a page and a sequel that lasts a sentence, and then you're on to the next one. And that keeps it really going. But not all stories want that. Louise says, is the war another character in Beth Ann's story? Or what would you call it, the setting? I would call it, it is the external framework, the context. So sometimes it is the setting because they're on the military, the air base, and then they're elsewhere in the story at a particular part of war that you don't see these situations otherwise. If you do a Dr. Zhivago, that Russia and the steppes are the setting. And becomes a, what do you call it? A metaphor for why you want to survive, why you want to keep going, why love matters, whatever it is. So the setting can be used as to create conflict in a story. The setting can be used to show characterization in a story. The setting can be used to do all sorts of things in a story. So it's not necessarily in what Beth Ann is doing, it's not necessarily its own character. But if you have a Old Man in the Sea, Hemingway, where the old fisherman basically gets lost at sea, not really lost, but his oars fall out and he is consumed by the ocean, and how does he survive? Then that setting is a character in the story. If you read something like, a lot of mystery stories are about place as much as they are about the character. Yeah, and in Beth Ann's particular story, it's a subplot there. So it all depends to that. Louise, that was a good insights. But in Beth Ann's particular story, it's a more metaphor for what she's dealing with. Helen says, I have trouble figuring out how to make both the heroine and the hero always take action rather than react to each other. And that's just part of, that's why you learn about scene and sequel. That's why you learn that when they're just reacting to each other, it's because the author puts them into a situation that they have to. And you read stories, maybe you don't, maybe you're lucky. But if you are reading contests or something like that, oftentimes you will find a writer that is not yet ready to be published or doesn't realize that you want something more in a story than simply having the characters bickering or, you know, she misunderstood him, and so meh, 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 and then he misunderstands her, meh, 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 and it's all reaction. But there's no story. You want to just, I don't know, take them in a jail cell and lock them in for a while so they can get over it, so they can get back to what is the story about. So writing reaction is easy, but it doesn't make a story. And that's where learning how to use that scene and sequel can be invaluable to help you avoid a particular just reaction. Okay, great questions, guys. Anything else that was creating challenges here? All right, somebody, Jackie, do you like the rule of threes for trying to overcome a goal? Let's put it this way. Someone has clearly created a system that this makes sure that it's not easy to overcome a goal. And so 3, sometimes you're only going to face one conflict. And it's a big enough conflict that it's not easy to overcome. Sometimes you want to use more challenges. 3 is one of those numbers that basically go back to caveman days and primitive societies. And oftentimes they had a 1, they had a 2, and then everything else was just like everything else. So there's, again, 3 is something that we really understand that somebody's trying to reach this goal. Doing it just twice, maybe not so much. But if every single goal in a scene needs 3 things to it, it becomes a pattern that the reader quickly picks up on, because it's like playing musical notes, and it's like dum 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 dum, and we as the reader can see it, so then it's not useful. So I've never heard of the rule of threes to overcome a goal, but again, think you have the big goals, so you're only going to use 3, or you have the scene goals, are you always going to use 3? So that can be a little bit challenging. Okay, talk to the thing. Helen is saying that I'm writing a summary of my story from all main characters' point of view so that I make sure they're all acting rather than just reacting. And that's extremely helpful. Oftentimes, when I was starting out, I would have a whiteboard and I would have sticky notes. And this was his sticky note, and this was her sticky note. So what she's doing and what he's doing, and any other main character. which when people start saying, I have 9 main characters, it's like, whoa, you're asking the reader to keep track of 9 people at a family reunion you've never met before and care about each one of them. Now, it can be done, but it's not it's something that can add more complication to a story. So make sure that the characters that you're using matter. Then what I would do is I would add a color for when the romance, where is that? If you're writing a romance, it's every scene that you're doing throughout the story. But sometimes it's more about something else external that's going to complicate the romance. So it would give a visual to, I knew that the publisher that I wanted to publish my first work, I analyzed their books. What was their average length of chapters? How many scenes per chapter? And it was very, very consistent. So that helps to know if you are aiming for 17 chapters with an average of 5 to 7 scenes in a chapter. And you can put it on a whiteboard and you can just get a visual for it. Beth Ann says, sometimes I struggle with what is happening internally with the character question in the templates. Would you discuss, please? Well, basically, except for male action adventure, most novels are about the emotion. They are about the feeling and what is hard for this character and what do they feel about what they're going through. That's who we read through. And that's why the belief systems matter so much, because you're not going to take those 2 characters out of that story and plunk them into another story and have everything unfold basically the same way. Because the way I've described it is that your daughter comes home to introduce the guy she wants to marry. And she brings home, at the time he was still available, but a Prince William. So royalty, somebody who is more than just the role that he does, but has been in the public eye. And so you have a sense that there would be challenges in that marriage, but still, if she really loves him and he really loves her, and that they're ready to face those challenges, then you'd be happy for them. But what happened if your daughter brings home the son of a man who was a serial killer? And they do have sons. They do have daughters out there. You change the character, you change the story. So the internal aspect of a character is what makes them unique. So that's something to remember as you are remembering to bring out that internal, because that internal is based on the fears, on the what triggers them, what makes them happy. All those things are really why we read about a character and have empathy as the reader with that character, want to find out what's going to happen, want to root for them. It's not because of they've got to get over one more hill or work assignment or something. It is about who they are, and who we are is based on how we respond to stress, how we have faced challenges in our life, and all of that is internal. Okay, I hope that helps a little bit. Louise says, are there other ways to reveal everyday world for each character other than devote a chapter to the heroine and then another chapter to the hero? The everyday world is just to show their context. So all right, think about the movie Hitch. The movie Hitch, from his point of view, we saw a prologue. And in most movies, a prologue is what happens before the story starts. So the prologue, we saw him as that young, idealistic college student who fell in love with a beautiful woman and just wanted to do everything for her, and she broke his heart. Now, we needed to know about that. So when we saw suave, debonair, Hitch start his story, what he's doing there is he's helping 3 different men get over their own fears in order to, they have a woman that they think they really love and want to be with. And so we see him in that everyday world. And you don't have to do it chapter by chapter. You could do 2 or 3 chapters in one point of view and go into the other one. But it is just to give the reader a context. And that context is, so you see somebody who is frightened of everything. At the end of the story, they're no longer frightened because of everything they've gone through. They still may not like spiders, but they've gone through all this stuff in order to reach their external goal, whether it is finding a love that is forever or stopping the bad guys. So it's just about, in your particular story, Louise, you're learning about both persons. You're not going into their backstory. You're learning about both people when they're on that train together and how they're going to react to the outlaws. And the fact that she has a Derringer hidden, and the fact that he is overpowered before he can help, because in his role as a sheriff, that's what he should have done. So you're putting the context, you're showing that character who they are in this kind of a situation. Most of us, when we meet somebody, if we meet them in a situation that is, hi, how are you? My name's so-and-so, and you've got a drink in one hand and you are stuffing little canapes in your mouth in the other hand, you don't get to know them. You don't know who they are. So by showing them in their context, that's how you clarify. This is where they're starting, but some things are going to have to change. So look at the movies that we have. We have Hitch, True Lies, Aeon Flux, Princess Bride, How Stella Got Her Groove Back, and Must Love Dogs. Very different movies, very different genres, but it is, watch how each of them starts as a way to contrast with the end of the story. So I've got somebody here. I'm sorry, when it says Facebook user, it's like, okay, that's Jackie. Can we switch point of views by scene rather than by a chapter sometimes? Absolutely. You don't have to wait because there's multiple scenes in each chapter, unless you're James Patterson. But then wouldn't we have to announce whose viewpoint we're in with a character name? This is why you use those little asterisks or hashtags. You know, you see 3 of them and then it shifts. You can do that to show a change in point of view. Or if you get really good, you can actually, you're in his point of view and then you change to hers. And you do it by, there's a number of different ways, but it's basically his name's Sam and her name's Kate. We're in Kate's point of view. We're feeling things from who she is. And so we understand that. But then if you're changing point of view, you can go by his using her name, saying, Kate, I don't do that. And he steps back and you're in his skin. So you can do all sorts of things about, you don't have to do one point of view for a whole chapter. You don't have to be very rigid in that. Helen, I do that all the time. I just leave a space and use the new point of view character's name early in the new scene, or someone talking to that character. But that's what that space helps the reader, that did, hashtag. It just lets the reader mentally adjust that there's going to be a shift, because if you're doing a good job with your characters, your readers are in that person's experience, their mind, their emotion, everything. So when you shift over to another, you want to make that shift as seamless as possible. So giving them a heads up can be helpful, because if you've ever seen somebody who's tried to go back and forth in points of view, and as a reader, you're just going, oh my God, I have no idea who's talking here. I have no idea whose feelings, they're just yamming at each other. So, Jackie, I hope that helps a little bit better. And Helen, thanks for jumping in there too. And a lot of the questions, there is no one right way to do every story every time. There's no hard and fast rules in that sense. You have to have 3 scenes in every chapter. You have to have 17 chapters for the book. But particularly if you're working and trying to get a book out to a particular traditional publisher, by looking at what they're most comfortable at, with the type of story you're telling, trying to work towards that so they feel comfortable. And that's why if your publisher or the reader expects a romance of 50,000 words and you give them 110, they're going to be halfway through, they're going to be like, wait a second, this is going on for too long. Because they've been trained, and we train ourselves to expect certain, this is going to be, it's like if you're going to a grocery store and you want an orange and somebody gives you a pear. And it's like, yes, they're both fruit, but that's not what you wanted. You wanted the orange. So that's why we ask about word count, and why we look at, even with hooks, too many hooks is going to make the story really tense. And if you're writing a cozy mystery, that's too much. So there's a lot of things are just based on, not just because the editors or the agents say, I like it this way, but because the publisher is used to having this many words or this so that the reader feels comfortable with it. If you've ever picked up a book, and Thomas Wolfe is an example, where he did that. Basically, he put in, remember when paper went through the dot matrix type of thing? Well, he typed a book and never stopped, just went right through all of it, and then hands it into his publisher. and said, here, you break it up where you want it. Well, when you got to his level, so the publishers knew there was an audience for him already and they could do that and they had enough staff to do that, then they would. But that's not something that they're going to do for most of us. One, in the 80s and the 90s, there was so much downsizing in publishers that you lost a lot of, and you can see it in the work that's published now. You see a lot more typos and errors, and it's just because they don't have enough people to go through it. So the whole point of understanding where they're coming from is so that you can get them something that's easy enough for them to pull together and be published. But if you give them something that needs a lot of work or a lot of editing or a lot of 600 pages down to 60,000, they don't have the time. And there's too many other people knocking on their doors saying, here, I've got something that's tailor-made for you. And the same way with the readership. When you are a reader, you want certain types of stories, whether it is a literary novel or Helen says, don't hand in a novel on a roll of toilet paper. Well, exactly. And if you give somebody a big manuscript like this for a storyline that normally is like this, that's that roll of toilet paper. And it's easier for them, time-wise, to simply say, thanks, but no thanks. Okay, before we leave here today, I wanted to let you know, Writing for Sexual Tension is the next workshop I'll be giving, and will start the 16th of March. That goes for 4 weeks. And there's the challenge, which is that free 3 days. And that's going to start next Monday, the 5th. So 5th through the 7th, there's going to be 3 days of information about it, lectures that are going to start. If you are interested in attending that, Helen says, take it if you haven't. It's so good. Thank you. If you are interested in doing that challenge, whether you've taken it before or not, look for 3-day challenge sexual tension, or you can just email me, and when Tech Guy gets home from work tonight, I'll have him make sure that you get into it. And so that's coming up. The challenge starts Monday. And then the next course after that is body language for writers. Now, the body language is for all genres. Sexual tension is also for all genres, because just because you're writing romance writers, definitely. But for other genres, you may be making mistakes and having the characters missing cues that we as readers wonder, wait a second, that's awful. Here's an example. Proxemics. Proxemics are the space between yourself and someone else. If you have someone that you feel uncomfortable with, which sexual tension oftentimes makes us uncomfortable if that's not what we want, and someone comes up and they stand right within your private space, particularly if you're the woman, because that's a threat, then you are going to react to it. Even if you're reading about it, and this is where they sometimes get it wrong on TV, where they have somebody step right into someone's personal space, which is only about 1 foot to 3 feet around you. That is Um, and somebody steps into that, and there's going to be a visceral, which means it's an automatic response to that. But if you don't realize that as a writer, you can have your characters doing that, and there's no response. And the reader's going, whoa, wait a second, I'm uncomfortable even thinking about that. So we look at things like that so that you don't miss cues that there's a tension based on the sexual attraction, based on just the awareness of men and women. And this is why men oftentimes want to say, well, I don't get in a work environment why she's picky, because I come up and I put my hand on her back, not just her shoulders, but her neck. Now, as women, we're going, no, this is too much. And he may want to say that he doesn't know what he's doing, but it is very disconcerting. So, body language for writers, that's in sexual tension, but in body language, we look at that. What are we communicating? What are our characters communicating? Helen says, the sexual tension class saved me from letting my characters have sex before they'd even touched hands. And I appreciate you sharing that, because we see it in TV shows where it's like, two people chip, 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 chip. And then all of a sudden they're mouth to mouth and jumping into bed. And it's, wait a second, these people they haven't worked up to where the viewer, the reader, wants them to have sex. And so it's sex, it is not intimacy. And sometimes they can have that, but there's a huge difference between the intimacy that we share sexually and the just having sex because it feels good. Okay, but body language is going to start May 4th. That's a 5-week workshop. And that are challenge dates for that. So there is in April. So the 23rd of April through the 25th of April. And I'll be sending out information on that in my newsletter here once we get sexual tension up and running. So I just want to let you all know about these upcoming courses, particularly the challenges, because 1, they're free. 2, even if you've taken them before, it doesn't hurt to have a kind of a reminder of, oh, I forget about this. And you can also meet other people in these courses that you can click with and expand your writing connection. So we just have a few more minutes here. Last questions or concerns? I think I caught up last night with the people who posted their homework. I will check in later today, but by about 6 or 7 o'clock tonight, the course, the Facebook group will be there, but I won't be responding just because I have to move into the next course and get going on that. Jack is saying, are you answering any more questions here? Well, our hour is up, but if you have questions, I'm here. So, and if you mean any more, do you mean in general for writing or? Louise says, this has been a great class and I've learned it's about the romance. Yes, if you're writing a romance, it's about the romance. Jacqueline says, You just answered my question about today at 6 p.m. Okay. Now there's a time difference there, so I'm not sure what the question was. Um, Louise, how long will you take work today? Till about 6 o'clock Pacific time. So West Coast time. I will go back in and check throughout the day. And Beth Ann is saying, with no pressure, if anyone wants to connect with her on Facebook and work on your writing, please send her a direct message. So thank you, Beth Ann. That's wonderful. And I know, Louise, that I gave you some feedback yesterday that you'll probably want to look at, and feel free to post again just before 6 o'clock, which, since it's daylight time, Colorado is not Arizona, so it does do daylight time. So whatever I think it's an hour difference between us, between Colorado and here. So, oh, okay. So Jackie meant, I think, that I answered the question about when I'll keep taking homework. Beth Ann says, the class has been fantastic. I really appreciate learning from all of you and can't wait to see your final books. And that's why I always maintain that we need two different types of writing groups. We need the critique group that can give us honest feedback, and then we need the support group. And the support group is the one that that's needed when we want to throw our hands up and say, forget it, no way am I going to do this. And that's where the support group comes in. And sometimes that's where someone in our families, if we have a partner or spouse or someone that loves us dearly, sometimes their role is that support, but sometimes they're not. So find support somewhere, because if you listen to those who like in romance, it's called the Rita or the Golden Heart. And when those winners of those always say, if it wasn't for this group or this person, I would have given up. So that's finding that support is invaluable. So Jackie did answer my question about her question, so we're all set there. So it's been a delight working with you this past month and to see the progress that you've made. And I want to wish each and every one of you the best of luck with your writing. And I know you will go far because you've committed to your career, not just a book, but to a career by investing in yourself. So thank you for doing that. And we will see you again online up until 6 o'clock West Coast time today. And then I hope to see some of you at the challenges coming up or in a future class. Hope, I know that she signed up in Louise for the next class. So Louise says, you've been holding our feet to the fire. That's so much nicer than saying, you've been bitch slapping us to keep going and to go deeper. So I will see you all sometime online or hopefully at a book signing one of these days. So take care and thanks for being here.